Hi, everybody. This is Dr. Michael Hirsch, Medical Director for the Division of Public Health and Chief Pandemic Information Officer for the city we love, the city of Worcester. And here we are in the merry month of June of 2022. And this month on June 11th, Worcester will be celebrating its tercentennial weekend. Wow. There's going to be fireworks nights and road races and community fairs, lots and lots of fun. So, look out on the city website or follow in the local news. You will see a lot of announcements about really fun events that you and your family can take advantage of. So, I have to talk about COVID at some point, and I am going to start out by talking about COVID, but then I'm going to switch over to summer fun, because June is that month where we make the transition from spring, which is such a beautiful season here in Worcester. All the trees starting to bloom and the grass is green again, and it just feels so great to be outside again without wearing 6 parkas and things. So we'll talk about that in a minute, but let's talk a little bit about COVID first. As we're recording this, the numbers in Worcester are going up. I'm not calling it a surge because it's still so much less than the surge we had in December and January, where the number of cases on a daily basis were off the charts. So this is an uptick. Let's call it an uptick. And it's an uptick of a variant of the Omicron one that caused those problems over December and January, called BA2. And what we've been finding is it's much more transmissible than Omicron, but it packs a less of a punch. So people are not ending up in the hospital or in the ICUs, although the numbers are going up slightly there. I want you to think of it as kind of the virus is like a bad cold, and particularly if you've had COVID before, or if you've been good with your vaccinations, getting the 2 preliminary doses of Pfizer or Moderna, or the 1 dose of Johnson & Johnson, and getting a booster. And if you're in the right population, meaning over 60 or having immunocompromise, cancer, heart and lung disease, obesity, diabetes, all those things qualify you to get a second booster 4 months after your first booster. If you've been good with all of those things, you may still get a case of this variant because it's really, really transmissible, and we've let loose with all of mitigations. We're not doing the 3 Ws anymore. We're not distancing, and we're not watching, wearing masks all the time. Hopefully you're still using hand sanitizers and things like that, but 2 out of 3 we're not doing anymore. So it's a very natural thing that the numbers went up. The numbers also went up because of April vacation, and we know that May is going to be a month where the numbers are going to keep going up. But we are about 4 weeks behind Great Britain. And Great Britain went through a surge like this in March. And now, as we tape this, they're going through an amazingly quick recession of the numbers. So we started our uptick in April, and I think in June, when you'll be watching this, the numbers should be in the rearview mirror for now. And this is the reality of what we think COVID is going to be about. It's probably going to come back as the colder weather hits us in the fall, may take even a larger spike from some new variant. So are we going to tear our hair out that we're never going to be rid of this thing? We are eventually going to be rid of this thing, because hopefully most people will have decided, I'm going to get the virus vaccine. The vaccine really protects you from getting into the hospital. And it also protects you from getting into the ICU. And worst of all, it protects you from dying. But more importantly, from a public health standpoint, and that's kind of what I do, the more unvaccinated people or under-vaccinated people there are, the more likely that new variants are going to sprout up, because that gives the virus a new chance to find vulnerable people to propagate in. And when they propagate, they make false copies of themselves that turn out to be either more transmissible, pack a bigger punch than their previous virus version, or worst would be to avoid the immunity that vaccination gives us. So the best thing I can tell you to have in your back pocket when you enter the merry month of June is to please, please, please make sure you're up to date with your vaccinations. If you started that process, don't put off the boosters and don't put off the second booster. Get all of those things done. And there are many, many places now that are getting it. Your primary care physician is going to do it in his office. The pharmacies are going to do it. And it's easier than ever. The stop the spread kind of vaccination is probably not going to go on much longer, because we're not finding a lot of people going to those clinics. And I think by June we may shut everything down from that standpoint. So I would take advantage of it if it's still going on in the beginning of June, or just head to your pharmacy. Go online, make an appointment and get it done. And the other thing that's important in all of this is that if you decided not to get your vaccine, or if you're one of those vulnerable people like I mentioned, with immune compromise, cancer, advanced age, obesity, diabetes, pulmonary or cardiac disease, you got to continue to say, I'm a vulnerable person, I'm a higher risk person, I'm going to wear my mask, especially indoors. And think about it. June is weddings. June is graduations. June are festivals and concerts, many of which are indoors. And if you're crowded in an indoor setting, that can become a super spreader event, and the mask will protect you. The days of mandating masks, I think, are behind us. I don't think people have the will to do it anymore. But I do think that you, as an individual, can protect yourself by wearing this. And the other key thing about stopping the spread, if this uptick that we're seeing in May continues into June, is please get those home tests that you can get through the CDC. And if you're not feeling well, or if your child is not feeling well, A, do not go to work, and B, do not send your child to school, and C, test and see if you are positive. If you're positive, then you've got to stay home. You got to stay home for 5 days after your last day of symptoms, and then once you're back in the fray, you have to wear your mask for another 5 days. COVID may return, as I said, in the colder weather. The more of us that are vaccinated, the less likely it will return in a form that will spread greatly. So this is apparently how the 1918 pandemic petered out. It didn't peter out in 1919. It didn't peter out in 1920. It was still lingering in 1921, but by 1921, the end of 21, it seemed to disappear. And it didn't really make a return appearance for a long, long time. There have been sporadic cases like it, but nothing like that 1918 pandemic. So, all right, I think I can I quit talking about the pandemic? Because I know you're kind of thinking, what a broken record this guy is. But so many people are calling me now, like I got I always have allergies. I always have allergies. Now I feel like it's a little more than an allergy. I say, test yourself, and then they call me back. Oh my God, I'm positive. What do I do? It's still here, still around. And please don't be angry with all those wonderful scientists who came up with these vaccines, because we probably oversold the vaccine when it first came out. We thought we could say proudly, oh, it's going to keep you from getting COVID. It apparently, once COVID started to mutate, it doesn't keep you from getting COVID as much as it does. It keeps you out of the hospital. And so now the CDC has decided, instead of looking at how many people have contracted the virus in your community, they look at what the hospitalizations are doing, what the ICU admissions are doing, and what the local death rate is. And so far, knock on wood, Worcester is in a good spot there. But as far as community spread, CDC has classified us as a high-risk community. So the vaccine is doing its job. It's keeping us out of the morgue. That's what we really want. And yes, we're going to have to contend with long COVID, the long-term effects of COVID. Many people are coming back now after having a bout of COVID in 2020 or 2021 with symptoms of different kind of illnesses, neurologic and musculoskeletal, problems with the heart, problems with their lungs. It's going to be with us for a while. This is not going to completely go away. But in the meantime, we've got to try to live our lives. And that means be responsible for yourself. Wear your mask if it's appropriate. Get your vaccinations, no question. Get your vaccinations. And if you live or work around somebody who is a high-risk person, get your vaccinations and wear your mask, just as if you were a high-risk person. That's being a good citizen. And you guys have been the best citizens in Worcester. So I want to segue here, awkwardly, to what June is, kind of the end of spring. Everything is beautiful, blooming, lots of pollen. If you've got allergies, I'm sorry. And then it goes into the summer. And what's going to be our biggest worry in the summer? It's going to be our biggest worry for the next century, and that's climate change has made the weather patterns strange. So if you've looked at how we've been doing, this year, we've had kind of lingering cold and wet for the spring here in Worcester. Sets it up for a lot of water that's lying around, standing water as we call it, and high levels in the reservoir. That's good. We want high levels in the reservoir. But that's a bad thing for breeding mosquitoes, right? The larvae, the little precursor to the flying bug, lives in standing water, puddles, in the old used tires that lie around that collect water, in bird baths and different kind of gullies and culverts. That standing water is a very good breeding ground for the mosquito larvae. And because the winter wasn't so bad, I think winter is tough even if we don't have a lot of snow. But we didn't have a lot of snow. And that usually means that the mosquitoes don't die off as much, and we're inclined to think that this is going to be a bad mosquito season. So the two main diseases that we're worried about here in the Northeast with mosquito-borne illness are West Nile virus and EEE, Eastern Equine Encephalitis. EEE is worse than West Nile. If you get bitten and you get West Nile disease, you end up with kind of flu-like symptoms, headache, low-grade fever, but it's tolerable. And most people that get it don't even know they get it. But Eastern equine encephalitis can really cause severe swelling of the lining of the brain, and those people have higher fevers, much worse symptoms, and they're much more likely to end up in the hospital. So the key thing here is remembering the story of Walter Reed. You know Walter Reed Hospital down in D.C., where our wounded warriors get cared for after their tours of duty in Iraq and Afghanistan? You probably have seen many touching stories of those poor folk that came back missing a limb or having a brain injury, and how they rehab there. It's a facility that has a long tradition of helping to rehabilitate our disabled veterans. Walter Reed, for whom that facility is named, was an Army surgeon in the Spanish-American War. So that was in 1898, long time ago, right? And what they learned when they were trying to fight the Spaniards in Cuba, which was the chief battleground, there were some battles also fought in the Spanish colonies in Manila, in the Philippines, but most of the fighting went on in Cuba. And Teddy Roosevelt led a group of soldiers called the Rough Riders, and more Rough Riders were dying of a disease called yellow fever than they were of Spanish gunshot wounds, right? And Walter Reed, as the Army surgeon, was finding that he wasn't doing so much surgery for injured soldiers. He was trying to take care of these yellow fever patients. And back then, in 1898, they didn't have any antivirals, they didn't have vaccinations, they didn't have antibiotics. They barely knew about intravenous therapy, where you get your fluid through your vein. No, he had nothing. But what he did figure out is the way that yellow fever spread was through the special mosquito that was native to Cuba that carried it. So he decided, I'm not smart enough to figure out how to fight yellow fever as a germ, but I can stop the germ from spreading if I get rid of the vector. The vector is the mosquito. So what did he do? Contrary to what a lot of the soldiers were happy about, he made the soldiers wear long sleeves and long pants. They didn't like it because it was very, very hot in Cuba, but it protected their body surface area from getting stuck with the mosquito sting. Then he got rid of all of the standing water in the camps that these soldiers were encamped in. So if there was a rain barrel or some kind of a gully, he got those all cleaned up so there wasn't a chance for the mosquito to multiply. And then he got mosquito netting to go over most of the cots that the soldiers were sleeping in. And by doing that, he reduced the incidence of yellow fever by 90%. It's a big, big chunk, right? He was a big hero. He was hailed as a hero. And the techniques that he used were actually used about a decade later. In 1912 to 14, the third attempt to build a Panama Canal to connect the Atlantic and Pacific Ocean by building a canal through Panama. That build had failed 2 times before because of so much yellow fever. This time, they used his techniques to stop the spread of yellow fever, and the canal was successfully built. So he's referred to in history books as the father of the Panama Canal. Ironic thing with that is that he died 10 years before that build. He died of a ruptured appendix, which apparently he suppressed telling anybody, and he allowed it to fester so long that he could not be saved. But anyway, Walter Reed gets a lot of credit for thinking outside the box about how to get rid of the vector. So the vector of Triple E and the vector of West Nile, mosquitoes. We have drain standing water, right? And we have wear long pants. We also know that those mosquitoes generally like to be outside in dawn and dusk periods. So if you can arrange your day a little differently so you are not outside in dawn and dusk periods, that will reduce the likelihood of you getting stung. Then, of course, the availability of something that will actually kill the mosquito on you is now available. It's called DEET, right? It's not DDT. A lot of people think it's DDT, which had all different kind of bad outcomes from having widespread spraying of fruit to reduce the number of insects that were harming the fruit. It turned out the DDT caused cancer, and that's gone now. DDT is banned. DEET is not DDT, and it's in most good insect repellent sprays. And that's what you need to think about. They come in different forms. You can get a spray form, you can get a towelette form, you can get creams, you can even get the creams that combine with other things like sunscreen if you're going out in the deep woods or something like that. If you wear that, you've got it made. So there we kind of have our 5 Ds, right? Dawn and dusk, don't go out. Dress properly, so long sleeves, long pants if possible. Wear your DEET and drain the standing water around your house. So you know where that might be. A bird bath, a little fountain that you might have, or just some little puddle that always forms after a rainstorm. Shake it up, get out of there. There's actually medication called larvicide that you can put into some of these if you can't really drain them well. Those are all things that will cut down on the risk of mosquito-borne illness. And they're serious illnesses. So you will hear over the course of the summer that we have participated in a Central Massachusetts testing program where we're looking for West Nile and looking for Triple E in special places all around Central Mass. And if we detect them, we have contracted with the Central Mass Mosquito Control Group, and they will selectively spray neighborhoods where this mosquito has been detected. And they will give us warnings, and we will give you warnings as to when the spraying happens, because on those days we want you to keep your windows closed, and we want you to keep your pets indoors, just for a few hours when the maximal amount of material that they're spraying, which contains DEET, will be out there in the atmosphere. The other thing you can do, and then I'll switch over to something else to talk about, is permethrin is a liquid that you can actually apply to your clothing that will repel the mosquitoes. You can actually buy clothing that's impregnated with this stuff, or you can buy the stuff and just paint it on your clothing. It does wash off eventually, and has to be reapplied. But it's another way of preventing mosquito bites. And people use all different kind of other remedies. Lemon eucalyptus, if you see that formulation in your local drugstore or an outdoor store, has a good, a reasonable effect against mosquito bites. So particularly, I'm a pediatric surgeon, as I've told you many times, and I get a child coming in I'm supposed to look at their hernias or some other body part, and I see this poor little kiddo coming in, bitten up totally. And, the parent will say, oh yeah, we were at a barbecue the other day, and he was running around just in his diaper, and we didn't think much of it. Believe me, you don't want to get that many mosquito bites. One of those causing an illness, particularly in a child, could be very, very serious. So let's talk about the other insect that we're all super worried about, okay? That's the tick. Ticks are endemic right now all over Massachusetts. It used to be that, we would say, oh, if you go to the Cape, you go to the islands, they're there. They're everywhere now. And it's very important if you go out into the garden to do your gardening, if you go on a hike, if you go into a meadow, beautiful meadow, to just kind of take a nice walk, you've got to do a good tick check when you're back, because those little guys latch on, you don't even feel it, and you got to look for them. So it's nice to have a friend maybe help you look very carefully to make sure that you don't get a bite, because these little ticks, unfortunately, are carrying some very serious diseases. Lyme's disease is one of them. There's another one called ehrlichiosis. There's another one called Rocky Mountain spotted fever. These are all illnesses that are serious. Rocky Mountain spotted fever and ehrlichiosis are kind of acute diseases. They're kind of like typical viral symptoms diseases. Lyme's disease, as you all know, is what we're worried about COVID might be becoming, because it seems to be a chronic thing. You get it, it flares up, it goes away, flares up, it goes away for years. And you know probably some people in your family or in your orbit that have had Lyme's disease, and it's very, very hard to treat. But if you catch a tick on your body, or you've gotten a bite which looks a little bit white in the center and red around it, like a halo of red, that's a tick bite. If you get to it early and ask your doctor to give you a prescription for doxycycline, you just have to take like 2 doses of doxycycline, and you can reduce the likelihood that this tick bite will propagate whatever it was carrying. Why are we seeing so many ticks? Again, it goes back to climate change. The deer population is really, really expanding. We don't see a ton of predators out there that can control the deer population. And so deer ticks are very notorious for carrying Lyme's disease. We also know that there are more and more stranger predators out there. They don't necessarily eat deer. But I had a black bear in my neighbor's yard a couple of days ago. There are many, many coyotes around. Black bear, I'm just worried about somebody essentially getting on the wrong side of the mommy bear and the cubs. Then the mommy bear becomes quite aggressive. Usually they're not that aggressive. But if you do see a black bear, you're supposed to keep looking them in the eye, make yourself look as big as you can, and back away. Don't turn and run away, back away. With coyotes and foxes and stuff, if you're seeing them in the daytime, it's a high likelihood that they may be carrying rabies. So it's really important to kind of just scare them away. They scare away pretty easily unless you're getting a coyote in a big pack. And sometimes they've zoned in on your pet or figured out there's something in your yard they really want. You know, if you're barbecuing or you've just thrown out some bones in your waste paper basket outdoors. So that all sounds terrible, because I don't mean to make it sound terrible. I'm very excited about, spring and summer here. It's a great time to be outdoors. We want people to be outdoors, and we want them to be safe outdoors. And that's why we have to really concentrate a lot on the protections that we have, DEET and those 5 Ds for the mosquito. And DEET also works to some degree against ticks as well. But with ticks, it's like being sensible. Don't go out gallivanting in the fields barefoot, wear socks, do the kind of things that will minimally expose your skin to one of these little creatures to latch on to. So the other thing I wanted to talk about was water safety, because I know, as you know, many of you are grandparents or parents, and you have young kids and they love to swim or they love to hang out. Very importantly, try to get your kids swimming lessons, right? That's an important piece of safety if you're going to go in the water. Another big part is try not to have your kids or you yourself go in the water alone, and especially in a isolated kind of a lake or a pond or a stream. There should be a buddy with you. Even if the buddy is on the shore while you're in the lake, they should be looking at you and making sure that you're coming up and out when it's time to come out of the water. And if you're really going to be doing a lot of water activity, like let's say you have one of those little personal speedboats, ski-doos or whatever you call them now, and you want to get in the water, you really should go beyond just having swim lessons. You should probably be wearing a personal flotation device, and you should have somebody in the family know how to do CPR, because if they pull one of your loved ones out of the water, you should be able to try to get them resuscitated before the ambulance came. And if you're going out on Lake Quinsigamond in a boat or anything like that, definitely wear a flotation device. I would say of all ages. Yeah, maybe it's uncomfortable if it's a very hot day. It's just the safest thing to do. And it sets a good example for the young ones who don't probably know how to swim that well, that they should be paying attention to that too. Water safety is very important. You all remember the tragedy that befell Officer Familia last summer when he tried to go in and help 3 young boys who had wandered their way up into Green Hill Lake, and unfortunately he paid the ultimate sacrifice. And I take my hat off to him every time I see that family, the Familia family. They're wonderful people, and they're really trying to make lemons out of lemonade by making people aware of the need to know about being safe in the water. And the other factors involved in safety, we talked a little bit about that last month when we talked about home safety. And I think that since we're talking more about outdoors, I think you have to really consider, if you are going on a hike or if you are going on just a long walk, make sure you're well hydrated. Take a bottle of water with you. Dehydration in the sun is very, very big part of why we see patients in the emergency department all summer long. I would make sure also that you're not being a distracted walker or hiker. That's one of the main reasons now that we're seeing pedestrians become victims of being struck by a car. They're walking along, texting as they go. And that's not safe. And they are missing, red lights and crosswalks and all the things that the Department of Transportation has put in place to try to make our pedestrian walkways safer. They're not taking advantage of it because they're distracted. They're distracted pedestrians. And we already have distracted drivers. So the combination will lead to tragedy in many cases. So don't you be one of those people, or at least if you're not texting or playing games like your grandkids are, warn them, tell them, please leave the phone alone while you're walking. You know, if you want to answer a phone call, that's a different story, but stop and don't cross the street when you're doing that. Very, very basic. Do not be distracted if you're going to be going down the lane across the street, and pick the crosswalk that's the place to go across the street, not the middle of the street, not jaywalking. You have to give the drivers a little help here. Also, don't go walking in non-reflective clothing at night. I can't tell you how many times when I'm rushing into the hospital to go to a trauma that I have a near miss because some little fella is out on a bike with, you know, all black clothing, and I very nearly hit them with my car. I think that the summer is such a great time to reconnect, barbecues and baseball games, and whether it's in Polar Park or just locally in your summer leagues and things like that. Lots of soccer, lots of other sports, lacrosse. So we want you to be outside. We want you to be busy and in shape, not sedentary, meaning you're not sitting around all summer long. But with activity comes some risks, and we want to lower those risks as much as we can. So I hope when next we speak, and we'll be talking probably about 4th of July and everything else, you've enjoyed the tercentennial celebration here in Worcester. We have a wonderful, wonderful community that's getting better and better. I think that the next decade points to so many improvements, and I'm very excited about it. And it all will, start with the big tercentennial celebrations on June 10th through the 12th. So I wish you well during those, and I hope when next we speak, we'll be saying, wow, COVID was bad, but it's over. It's never going to be really over, but at least we get a little hiatus over the summer. Let's keep our fingers crossed and have a wonderful spring. Thanks a lot for listening, and we'll see you next time on Stay Connected with the Worcester Senior Center.